some of the notes. That's the open strings. You can get them with the thumb. Excuse me, you get them with the first finger, so I should do in this hand. I'm plucking with the thumb. Right there. Why did I do that? I don't know. You could do it just all with the thumb. Seems like I get more noise if I come in the other direction. So I'm hitting the open string real fast and then putting the note on the board. That's the standard way. Another great way that actually sounds bigger. I just didn't train myself in this manner, so it's not my number one way, but I've had students that do it. Yeah. Anybody else want to try that? We could take a moment and just try to make that noise. Sure that guitar's big enough? Maybe not. You want to play, Jim? Ellington used to say, don't mean a thing if they ain't got that swing. So this helps it swing. I don't know why. Some things I don't care if I know why. This would probably be one of them. So I started to say another great way to get that noise that helps bass lines sound good, even if you're just playing regular notes. Just something else to do is let the left hand pull off the string sideways. The string will go like this. You'll release your finger, and the string will go like that. It'll start humming up and down a little bit, which is good. It gets louder. So this. It's more polite sounding. It's not quite. In one sense, it's more intense because it's louder, but it's not as noisy as doing it with the right hand, at least for me. I'm looking for the noise more. I like the noise. What else? If you play this way when you're playing your bass lines, it's easy to get a lot of noise, complementary noise, of course. There, all this job. Strings hitting the board, sound of the finger tapping into the string. Just helps the percussive effect. I'm not saying go crazy and do this on every note. It's up to you. When you hear the early rock and roll, when it was still rock and roll, and they had that technique called slap bass, a lot of that sound that you get is because of the guys hitting the board and then pulling the string, you know. It was just the technique that made a lot of wonderful rhythms, the counter rhythms inside of the big rhythm of the moment. You could hear this thing happen. That was exceptional in its propulsion. It added more forward motion to the whole groove, having these little inside extra notes in there that pushed a new rhythm in between what was already going on. Because they could have just gone, like Rock Around the Clock, the guy could have just gone. I promise you it wouldn't have been a big hit. It just sounds so horribly stiff this way. Madison Avenue would have never heard about rock and roll. The whole world would be different. Just because they didn't slack that bass. You could say that about a lot of stuff. How different the world would be if this, that, and that. You know, one little thing. If Leo Fender didn't have a guitar that howled when he plugged it in, you know, bought an electric guitar because people started asking to help them. Actually, no, he started fixing people's electric guitars. You know, Leo with the solid bodies, he hadn't done it yet. He was just fixing them. But they would feed back. They would when you plug them in. And yeah, everything else in his room would vibrate just like that. You know. It's good if you're 12 years old and want excitement, but it's not so good if you're playing radio somewhere to make a living. You know, so got him thinking. So if those things hadn't held, he might have said, it's good enough. You know, we don't need any solid guitars. And then Gibson wouldn't have called Les Paul back. Of course, this place is littered with solid guitars. I can see it's a massive difference here. What do you call this here? Look at all this beautiful. See some with the same headstock here. That's kind of nice. This is great grandfather. His uncle. So bass lines. Another thing to do with bass lines is use those approach notes, like I was saying. So when you hear it's C7, most of that was chord tones. Most of that was still these things that we outlined. I just didn't play them like flat 7, the third, and the fifth. Started adding those half steps. Two approach tones there, right in between. Approach tones and chord tones is pretty much the story. Stitching tones. Those approach tones are like stitching together the chord tones. I did say there were two pairs two series of groups of two. This is another kind of pair. Use these. Maybe before we had this one paired off with this, but when you start pairing these, then you'll pair this and this. You'll pair this and that. So I'll say it by number. 5 goes with flat 7 in the second set of pairs, and flat 7 goes with 1. You can see it. Just something to work on. There's the third with the 1. There's the 5 with the third. And that's all she wrote for the C7. The other pairs again were more like when you watch bass players and they're playing like this at the top. These automatically, the first set of pairs I was doing kind of go this way, and the second set kind of go that way. That's how chords work on guitar too. So I mentioned 7 types of chords that you'd want to do those bass lines on when you were asking about that. But you recall, you were saying, gee, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I'm saying, I mean, I know I've got, these DZs that I can walk up in here.
Yeah, those are walking chords. Walking chords is great. That's a beautiful technique too, where every beat has a chord. You won't hear a separate bass as such. I mean, you can hear it if you listen for it, but
It sounded like you went sort of bass chord, bass chord, bass chord.
Well, bass chord will give you a polka effect. You don't want necessarily that either. Jazz polka. I know you were looking to play that. It's not quite like that, but what you do is you try to imagine the sound of a big band, for instance, and how you hear the horn sections, where they come in and do these little punches. You might hear right on the beat. Then they were in front of the beat. The 3 main places that chords can be put in to make life real easy in this area are on the beat, after the beat, which is the easiest syncopation that we have in this field. Or in front of the beat. That's the tricky one. It's not that hard to learn though. You hear it all the time when real music's happening, the guitar clinics in Culver City. Trying to hear those figures, piano player figures, horn section figures, or vocal figures. The simplest ones that I've taught to people that get you in the game real strong go like this. The first one is a dotted quarter note followed by an eighth note. It's an old thing. It's documented in many treatises on jazz now as the Charleston rhythm. It just goes down, 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 down. That's That's a lot of music. Play, I forgot to talk about some other way to touch the strings. You can use the back of your finger if you want to scrum and kind of play some bass lines. This is a way that gives you everything you want without holding the pick. You're able to keep that bass going and still kind of get some quick scrums in. You could have all these cats folded up working on some other project. Back of the fingernails. Now how did that bass line happen? That was the best sounding one I did all day. It was every note between here and here except for one fret. I just didn't play the, I left that one out. How come that works? I don't know. No, I do know.
Isn't it
I
good?
just want to say all the words that it takes to explain it. This is a scale. We can all hear that. That's part of the blues tonality as well as, of course, the major scale, because the blues, as we said earlier, only needs this as a minimum. That's in there, we're okay. That comes on the seventh. We lower that seventh. Mixolydian, as you know. Children said the word mixolydian earlier. I use that term. So if you've got this already, and you fill in just an approach note into there, you have to do a lot of trial and error, because the standard question in everybody's head at first is, how do you know when to do it? How do you know if it'll sound any good? You won't, so you experiment a lot. But after a while, you start to hear it. You won't get as scared. Just throw them in. So yeah, between here, we added this chromatic tone. Some books would say never play those funny notes on the strong beats harmonically, which are 1 and 3. Well, they would say this is a no-no, but don't worry about that. Just if you have to think about all that too much, you'll be back playing other fun stuff instead. You just won't. It just gets maddening and exasperating to have to do that much thinking. Experiment if you like the sound. Even if some of the goofy notes are right on the first or third beat, that's okay. Those are harmonically, again, the strong beats, meaning that's where chords tend to change. If they're going to change in a bar and not on every beat, there are things that change on every beat. But when chords don't change on every beat, but do change in the bars, of course, most often it's on the second half of the bar. So those are considered the strong beats harmonically. Rhythmically in jazz, 2 and 4 are accented, as many of you know, if anything's accented, in the sense that there's a sudden 1, 2, 4. It's 2 and 4 that are kicked. I'm purposely not using any pairs. I'm just letting this thing.
The Charleston rhythm, you said there were a couple.
That's right. There's one other seminal one. It starts a half beat late. Thank you for keeping me back on that beat. It's the one that goes, I was just doing it in my playing there. It starts on the second half of beat 1, on the end, that is. Then I believe on, this is beat 3, and 3, yeah. Then on beat 3, you strike either a quick 8th note or a full quarter note, and then beat 4, there's nothing there. Unless you are playing chords there, because that's what we were really saying is you're going to add chords on those beats. Then that would be 1, and 2, and 3. Now, if you're going to let it ring on beat 3, then it'll ring all the way through the bar, maybe. Like, I like to hear the things ringing. I used to hear these B3 players when I was a kid, and it seemed like they would hit that chord and it would ring, and then they'd do this stuff, and I just love that sound. So I'm not against letting some of them ring instead of cutting everything off.
Okay, what was that?
Letting that note ring. Well, look at that. I got stuck harmonically and realized I wanted to stay on the 4, so I played 4 of these in a row. It beat the hell out of stopping. I didn't want to play a different chord. I was really hearing just that I should be here because I wanted to go an old progression that uses the tonic diminished chord. Meaning if we're in F, then this